Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show, Leadership Podcast, a podcast to spotlight purpose-driven Asian leaders making an impact. This is your host, Priyanka Kumla, joining you on our 101st episode of Leadership Podcast. A big thank you to each one of you for making this podcast what it is today and for the tremendous amount of love, support, and encouragement across the globe. Thank you so much. And as a reminder, do continue following me, Priyanka Kumla, and a Curryupstartup Leadership Podcast page on LinkedIn to receive your LinkedIn live notifications. And if you're going to watch this on YouTube, give us a subscribe and like so we know how this podcast is helping you become a better version of yourself. Well, you might be curious as to who my special guest is going to be for the 101 episode. And here you go. I have Saleema Vellani, who's an award-winning entrepreneur with me on the show. Hi, Saleema. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Priyanka. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And to our listeners, this is going to be a fun episode with a lot of nuggets of wisdom. Now, let me tell you who Saleema is if you haven't had the honor of knowing her until the show. Well, Saleema is an award-winning social impact entrepreneur. She's a keynote speaker, an adjunct professor, and the author of Innovation Starts with I. It's a fabulous book that's up for release next month. We'll hear a lot more about that book as a sneak peek to our special listeners today. Now, well, Saleema is an amazing person to get to know because I've followed her work for some time and have been really amazed with her entrepreneurship skills. But more than that, the fact that she has reinvented herself several times. So a new version of Saleema is here for us to be unveiled. And I'm also curious about her Asian roots. So let's get started on this episode. Are you excited, Saleema?
Very excited. Let's do it.
Awesome. And to our listeners who are joining us live, please drop in a quick hello and the country that you're tuning in from. One lucky listener is going to get a free book giveaway. Well, it's the book that Saleema has been working on with her thoughts and how you can be future-proof in terms of getting the job that you love and being an entrepreneur. So here's an amazing chance to get that book. All you have to do is just continue hearing this episode and we'll find a way to get this book to you. All right, Saleema. When we spoke prior to the show, I was curious about how you've traveled all over the globe. Your grandfather, he started from India, he moved to East Africa, and here you are after a whirlwind tour of, doing the art of living in Bangalore or moving to Brazil, moving to Italy, being an entrepreneur, trying to figure out who you are, and then to Canada, and here you are finally in the US. So when you look back at your kind of an eat, pray, love story, how does it feel now that you're in one place finally?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's interesting because I think throughout all my experiences, actually started when I lost my mom at the age of 16 to cancer. And I was, grew up in Toronto, just in the suburbs of Toronto, thought I would stay in Toronto, Canada my entire life. And that was my vision. I didn't really know anything else. And so when my mom passed away, I ended up trying to figure out what does home mean because my definition of home got shaken up. And so I started traveling the world and started finding, it was just very eye-opening to see how a lot of the world lived when I lived in the Dominican Republic and then Brazil, moved to the south of Italy. And it was just so, I spent most of my 20s, living out of suitcases and traveling and even making a career in international development in order to continue helping and exploring the world. And that interestingly, that definition of home kept changing for me. And I was like, well, what does home really mean to me? And I found after that Eat, Pray, Love trip that you mentioned Bangalore, that was part of my trip when I went to India and I went to Bali and Thailand when my house had a fire and I got laid off from a couple of jobs. And I really had to go figure out who I was and redefine home. And I realized after all of those experiences that home is really being at peace with myself. It doesn't have to be a physical location. And it's about that inner feeling and, feeling like home, feeling that, I'm comfortable in my shoes, having the confidence, knowing who I am and not just who I think I am, but seeing myself through the lens of other people and really actively introspecting and developing self-awareness and having that and practicing that, I think is how I define home now.
It's a very philosophical journey, Saleema, and what you are explaining to us is not easy. There's a lot of spiritual journey that you'll have to do within yourself because you're trying to find happiness, joy, and peace within yourself. And, that's one of the underestimated skill sets for a lot of us out here, especially during the pandemic. So, I'm so glad you're here sharing your story, your authentic story, which a lot of people might not be familiar with. So thank you for that. And we have a handful of our live listeners tuning in, congratulating us on our milestone episodes as well, given we just completed our 100th episode. We have Deepika Kandelwal. Hi, Deepika. Welcome to the show. And feel free to say a hello, Saleema, to all our loyal live listeners as well.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for engaging.
And we have Pawan Vadlamudi. Hi, Pawan. Welcome to the show. We have Nabila El Fazazi. Hi, Nabila. Welcome to the show. And thank you so much for your kind congratulatory messages as well. Now, Saleema, let's go back to a few years, I should say, of our life. So at the age of 21, you co-founded and launched Brazil's largest and the number one language school to finance an orphanage and social development programs, which has taught several thousands of students, up to date. How did you start this idea of being a social impact entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I think for me, in my experience, I wasn't trying to be an entrepreneur. For me, I had studied international development, and my dream was to go work at an international organization. My dream was to get that dream job that, and climb the ladder is what I was told or what I was trained or taught growing up with my parents and, following a career path. I never really explored entrepreneurship, studied it. I didn't even call myself an entrepreneur. I didn't even know it was cool. So when I started out doing stuff, it wasn't about me trying to be an entrepreneur in the first couple of businesses that I had. It was really a secret to me because I couldn't get a job during the last crisis in 2008, 2009. And so I went and did this path out of survival mode as a means to hopefully find that dream job later, until I realized later, coming to the US, that entrepreneurship was cool. I didn't have access to mentors, communities, investors, like all that sort of stuff. I didn't have any of that. I wasn't marketing anything on social media. It was very much trying to solve a problem. And so for me, when I couldn't get a job, when I graduated from college in 2008, I decided to, go get more international experience. I managed to save up a little bit and go to Brazil to help finance, basically help out in an orphanage. And when I got there, my boss said, Saleema, you're not going to work at the orphanage. I want you to be in Rio de Janeiro, and I want you to help start this language school to help finance the orphanage to improve our operations because we need to keep it running. And so it's interesting how he saw a lot of the strengths in me that I didn't, or he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And interestingly, when I was tasked with that and went to Rio and started the school, there were a lot of challenges. It was very, very hard. But it was also, just growing the school when we were teaching all these languages and going through the pivot of focusing on Portuguese for foreigners and seeing the impact that it had on the children. It really made me passionate about the mission. And it also taught me everything, basically doing an MBA within a few months of starting the school. So I really learned everything on the ground, how to really start a business and run something in a very, very challenging context in Brazil. It's not easy. And also living without water, recruiting volunteers that wanted to hang out on the beach. It was really challenging to find the right team, put the team together, and stay on mission. And so to answer your question, I wasn't trying to be a social entrepreneur. It really just kind of happened through wanting to add value and be of service and trying to figure out what I would do. And so I think when we're in that process, the best thing is when we're trying to figure out our sweet spot or what we can really do, that's, our purpose. I think there's only so much we can do in our heads. We have to go out and be an active leader. We already have enough thought leaders. We need more active leaders. We need to get out and try to figure out how we can add value, how we can make an impact, even if it's, volunteer work or service work of some sort. I think especially if you're young and you're trying to figure out what to do with your career, the best place to start is to figure out how you can add value, leveraging what you have.
No, that's amazing. Hearing such impactful stories in a different part of the world, especially the cultural challenges that you might have, the resource constraints. I'm so glad you've aced all of it. But tell me this, Saleema, you've coined this terminology, which is, hybridpreneur. And your story is a classic example of being a hybridpreneur. And the thing that I want to get out from this is, why should we embrace this concept of hybridpreneurs, especially to future-proof ourselves after this global pandemic? I think we've started realizing there's more that we can do with our lives.
Yeah, so I think the reason I created this concept, or I coined it and really brought it out, especially through my book, is that I struggled a lot trying to bucket myself as, in innovation, we don't necessarily, we shouldn't really box ourselves. Like, you're an entrepreneur, you're an intrapreneur. And I think I felt as I flip-flopped between being an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur, because I also worked with several organizations and tried to bring innovation and make change as the entrepreneur within the organization. And interestingly, I felt like you had to be one or the other for many, many years. And people generally box those things. Like, you're either running your own company or you're working a job. And we saw that a lot of people weren't lasting in their jobs. Turnover was increasing. And then a lot of people were also failing as entrepreneurs. So I said, well, why do you have to be just one? And why don't you do both? Or why can't you, leverage your passions, do your passion projects, even if they don't necessarily have to be something that you earn a living from. Earning profit, it's so important to grow, to invest at an early age and be able to, be fine financially and sustain yourself and have the lifestyle that you want without having to necessarily depend on your business, especially if you're an early stage founder. And then, being in that constant learning growth process and constantly upgrading your skills, refreshing yourself, keeping up to date with trends, and then giving back to the community, making an impact. Those are the four components of being a hybridpreneur. And giving back is really key. I think that we should constantly prioritize giving, and whether it's giving back to others that are trying to follow our path, whether it's doing work in another country, just adding value of some way. I think just those four components working together is what makes you a hybridpreneur. And I think that just it allows you to adapt to different situations in a very fluid way. And you can really leverage being both an entrepreneur of your own life as well as an entrepreneur. There's a lot of leverage you can do with both those paths.
It's very interesting. And I want to unveil a little bit of your life story as you move to the US. Tell us more about the 100 copy challenge. I think that's just an example of how you put hybridpreneur into practice as well.
Yeah, so that is one of my favorite stories. It all happened around the time of the Eat, Pray, Love trip. When I came back from India, Bali, I ended up coming back to Toronto, Canada, because that's where I usually get a visa, or I get a visa from Canada to come to the United States. And interestingly, at the airport, the immigration officer didn't allow me into the United States. He said, you don't have any rights to be here. You don't have all your paperwork together. You need to find a proper job that will sponsor your visa. And the category I was trying to go under, they just denied me. And I had never been denied entry before. And, my home was in Washington and I had to go fix up after the fire. My parents were in the area in the US. And I was like, how can I not be able to go to my house and go to the country that is not my home? And he let me in the next day saying that, I'll give you 2 weeks, go figure out your situation, make sure you come back with all the documentation. And if you can get a visa, then you get it. Otherwise, we're not gonna, you can't be in the United States. You're gonna have to be in Canada. And I didn't really know how to deal with that, because even though Canada was my origin country, and I had a lot of extended family there, I didn't really know. I didn't have a network and have a home in Canada. I didn't really have. It just didn't feel like home anymore to me. And so I was so driven to find a job that would sponsor my visa during those 2 weeks. I was trying not to stress out and panic. And I said, I have 2 weeks to figure this out. And so I reached out to everyone. I went through my phone contact list and my email database, Skype. I just went through everything, every single channel. And I said, let me set up 10 coffees a day or so, like 8 to 10 coffees a day, happy hours, dinners, lunch, breakfast, whatever. Fill up my days of coffee and just ask people for help and be like, hey, this is my situation. I'm looking for a job. How can you help me out? Or do you know anyone I can talk to? And interestingly, I got a lot of rejections, or a lot of, I'll think about it, or I don't have anything for you right now, or talk to this person. And interestingly, out of those 100 coffees, which I didn't really call it that at the time, but it was an exercise I went through, 2 people gave me a job. And one of them ended up being a consulting gig that was very, very, very interesting work I did with refugees and hydroponics. But basically, just doing that exercise, I've realized how much people are willing to help when you ask, and you do it in a very authentic way. And yeah, just having conversations and catching up, and not only when you need to, but I think it's important to constantly be doing a 100 coffee challenge. I did that with, my work when I was doing the work with refugees and hydroponics, trying to understand the different technologies to solve food insecurity in the Middle East and North Africa. A lot of employees or interns that have worked with me, they use that process to find their next job. I used it for my book interviews, to when I got stuck writing my book, applying that 100 coffee challenge and talking to leaders and entrepreneurs around the world. And I think even as an entrepreneur, it's important to keep building those relationships and go through a 100 coffee challenge.
No, that's very impressive. And I'm so glad you've kind of aligned it with the book as well, which I'm going to talk to you in a bit. Now, to our live listeners, please drop in a quick question or, a takeaway, something that's at the back of your mind in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation, because you have the thought leader and the implementation leader right in front of you. And that's a great chance for you to win the free book. That's the blood and sweat of Saleema after having interviewed 100 plus leaders. So here's your amazing chance to win that book. Now, Saleema, talk to us about your book. Something that's very cool about your book, the story behind, innovation starts with I, is it's self-published. You crowdfunded the book with around $40,000, and it aligns with the concept that you mentioned earlier, which is to ask for help. And I think that's just a great example of how the community has just rallied to bring your book to the stage where now it's in pre-order. Talk to us about the journey from interviewing 100 leaders all the way into self-publishing the book, and how does it feel now that you're up for release?
Yeah, wow, that could be a book of its own. That's actually a great idea, because I think that the publishing industry is changing very quickly, and so unless you have a platform or you have a track record of writing books or being an author before, it's generally very hard to get a traditional publisher. And so basically, I decided to write this book many years ago. It was like in 2014 that I started with this concept, and then I took a break for 5 years until I really lived my story and had enough to really share and confidently share my story and do it properly. And so, and also building a platform, I think, is really key. When I decided to write the book, my editor said, hey, if you're self-publishing this thing, you need to market your own book. You need to have a platform. You need to have an audience. And I know you've been behind the scenes most of your career, but you really need to have that. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful as an author. And so a couple of years ago, I think about a year and a half ago, I prioritized building the author platform and really trying to connect with other people that would be interested in my message. And then just going through the process, I tried to write a lot of my own stories, but I got stuck very quickly and said, there's only so much I can write from my own perspective. And when you're trying to write a book and develop thought leadership and share, it's important to talk to other people and get their perspective and to see how they perceive you based on your own story, as well as what are their perspectives around the topics that you're writing about. And so just going through that process when I felt stuck, as I always feel, whenever I feel stuck, I do the 100 copy challenge. And I decided to interview 100 people, and just learning from all those insights really helped shape my book and created so many interesting conversations that added a lot of value and helped me create tools or adapt tools and make the book more valuable to the reader. And then, just the process of I also went around the world and did design thinking workshops and workshops with entrepreneurs, just trying to really understand. I didn't want this to be just a North American focused book. I really wanted this to be for leaders globally. And so just going through the experience before many months before the lockdown, traveling to countries like Liberia, Morocco, Panama, going to interview different entrepreneurs, it really helped me, expand my perspective and understand that we're actually a lot more similar than we think, but we also face a lot of different challenges around the world. And so just going through that experience helped me drive the book to the finish line, which now it's in the process of, it's going to publish in the next month. And so just going through that process really helped me grow as an individual and actually step into my own next version of myself. So I kind of had to live the story I was telling in a different way, in a more evolved version. So that was very interesting. And then just the process of, publishing, it was a lot of work to try to figure that out. And I built a team to really help me with everything to do with the editing and the conceptualization, getting mentors, advisors, getting a lot of I'm very visual, so having a good design team and illustrators, artists, really bring everyone together to bring something very authentic to me, which you'll see when the book comes out. And the crowdfunding process was also very challenging because I said, if I'm going to do this myself or finance this myself, there's only so much I can do. And I'm not going to really get the word out by trying to do it all myself. And then what's going to happen? I put it on Amazon, and then who's going to buy my book? And so I said, let me figure out how to leverage the community and have their buy-in and actually leverage the pre-orders and have sponsors collaborate with different people. And, just it was so interesting how people are really, really willing to step and, support the project and actually enhance it. I learned a lot more about my audience through that project. Crowdfunding was very challenging, but it also gave me the confidence in what I was writing about and helped me drive it to the finish line. And, I would say it was basically an exercise that I call like a rejection ritual in a way, because you're going to ask and more people are going to reject you than support you. And you really have to not take things personally and be able to move on and say, are people going to support, and there are people that aren't going to support, and you can't make everyone happy. Same with the book. You can't make not everyone's going to love your book. And so just going through that process was a very resilience building exercise for myself. And yeah, so the book is coming out in about a month in April, and so really excited about it. And I'd say self-publishing is really, really challenging, but I think there's enough resources and information and community and different types of support out there that can help. And I think that it's a really great way to manage the creative process yourself and really own your book. I think that a lot of people are choosing to self-publish now instead of traditionally publish.
That's very cool. And the thing that I love about your story is the fact that you got to be resilient and fail smartly, because most of us have this fear of failing to begin with, so we don't even end up trying it. But how do you move on, just take it in a positive stride? I think that's just a success story that we have to keep hearing very often, especially in these challenging times.
Yeah, no, very much so. I think that 2020 was a year of the pivot for many of us, and I call this a reinvention revolution, where we're constantly needing to reinvent ourselves and go from version 1.0 to 2.0 or 2.0 to 3.0, or wherever you are in your life. We have these different episodes called life quakes, as you heard when my house burnt down, and a lot of things, I got laid off from those jobs and I had to go on that Eat, Pray, Love trip and find out who I was. I think that we have a lot more of that happening more frequently, and we have to be able to do it faster. So you might have one really big life quake. It might be in my case, your quarter life crisis. And then it gets a bit smoother if you're able to be proactive in your reinvention rather than reactive. Because I was reactive, it was very intense for me and a very, very tough time for me. I had to get a lot of support to get through that period. But I came out very strong, through that process, like I mentioned, through the 100 Coffee Challenge, getting really fulfilling work, really figuring out, you can only spend so much time in your head trying to figure out who you are. You have to go out and do stuff and take action. And we make stuff happen. Even though innovation starts with we make innovation happen by, partnerships and collaboration and community.
That's amazing. And we have a comment from one of our live listeners. We have Pavan Vadlamudi, who joined us briefly, and he would like to share that he loved your story, Saleema. So thanks for sharing that part of it. And thank you, Pavan, for joining us as well. And hope you'll join us at another future episode too. Now, as you were talking about the 100 Coffee Challenge, I'm trying to resonate it with my podcast, given we just finished our 100th episode. And now when I look back at my journey for the last 20 months, it's been the same kind of experience where you're looking to gain more wisdom, gain more perspective about life, and become a stronger version of yourself, not just for yourself, but also share that wisdom with your community so everybody could unveil and reinvent the next version. So thank you. As I was connecting the dots, it made me feel so good that talking with people is one of the best things that can happen. And I think it's a great way to meet more connections during this pandemic, especially.
Very much so. And I think not even just catching up with people that you know or you haven't caught up with in many years, but also just creating new connections. I think people are more willing to accept your connection on LinkedIn if you don't know them, but you have something in common or something that you're interested in. Just being really authentic about it. I think people are more willing to connect now virtually, since that is the world we're living in. And I also wanted to share that I do have a 100 Coffee Challenge tool, like a project management tool to manage your coffee, virtual coffee drinking process and setting up your meetings and follow-ups and everything. And it's available. I can share it in the show links later.
Awesome. We'd be happy to do that. We have a question from Deepika Kandelwal. What was your support system through your journey? Can you share a little more insight?
Sure, yeah. So I'd say that it's important to have a solidarity squad. And for me, the support network consisted of, having mentors, having coaches, having a therapist, really getting help. I think mental health, it's so important. I think that we don't want to wait until it's too late and we go through some sort of crisis. I think it's important to be proactive about that and make sure that we're getting the help we need when it comes to mental health. I think that, just having guidance, whether it's mentors, advisors, sponsors, career coaches, whatever it is, just try different methods. Even if you're listening to certain podcasts that, regularly while you're working out or cooking or doing something, just constantly, keeping up to date and listening to conversations that might inspire you or guide you in some way or inspire you to do things differently, that, more intentionally. I think that's really important. So I was constantly, reading, listening to podcasts, keeping in touch, even though I didn't really want to talk to a lot of people during that time because it was so challenging. But also when it comes to support network, I think also, the tools that I had with, I did a lot more yoga. I was doing meditation. I was really working on my breathing. I was trying different ways to connect more to myself, because I knew that I couldn't just rely externally on other things to make me happy. I had to do that work, and I had to be okay with accepting my emotions and accepting this is part of my journey, and everything that goes down has to come up anyways. And so this is not going to be permanent. So
I totally agree with you. The healing journey, trying to figure out who we are, it has to come from within us. But it's good to have a squad, a cheerleader group who would root for us and who see us, through the layers. I think that's very important, especially during these challenging times. Deepika, thank you so much for that interesting question as well. Now, let's go back to your book, Saleema. I want to focus more about, you're talking about the 12 future-proof work capabilities that we all need. Can you give us a sneak peek into what those are, and one key takeaway that you would love to share with our listeners from the book as well?
Yeah, sure. So through the interviews, I identified 12 12 proof capabilities. And so it starts with self-awareness. I think self-awareness was often left out of the innovation conversation, and the importance of knowing yourself, but through the lens of other people as well. The second one is intuition. I think intuition is very important. Curiosity, originality, which I'm also redefining, that it's not about having new ideas, but how do we leverage existing things to come up with original combinations of ideas. Also, influencing other people. I think empathy is really key. Collaboration. There's quite a few. I mentioned influence in the book. Another chapter is on, there's like storytelling, resilience, building all these different skills. Also, prioritization is a very important skill. Being able to manage different tasks, being able to know what to do, delegate, dump or delay. And so the book is basically these 12 chapters that are, starting with the framework of I, we, world, and trying to really take people from that individual journey and expanding out through other people into the world and making a ripple impact. And so, those 12 capabilities are important, because we always hear, having these certain future work skills, but skills are, they go to a certain extent, but capabilities you can actually adapt and use your capabilities in different ways. And so because we're constantly needing to adapt to different situations, I think it's important to develop those human capabilities, because we see automation increasing, and it's those capabilities, those human elements that are gonna help us thrive.
That's very true. So is there a favorite chapter in the book that you really love?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say favorite per se. There are a few that I really, really like. I think that the first few chapters are very strong because there's lots of tools in them. And I think it's very, very strong on the inner work and personal journey that people go through. I'd say probably, I think my prioritization chapter is one of my favorites, because I think that it's really helpful and actionable for people there's lots of tools in there to help people actually, understand what it's like to be a hybridpreneur and develop into that. I also think another chapter I really like is on intuition. I think finding your sweet spot. I think it helps people really reflect on their lives and find their sweet spot through, looking at what are the things that they excelled in. What are the things people see that they excelled in, or the praise they got from other people? What are the things that bring them the most joy? And then really tapping into that unknown area what are the things that you're open to testing? And I think that's where innovation lies. And so that chapter is really great because it has a lot of tools as well, and helps people really, find their purpose or find their sweet spot and really own in on that.
I'm excited for the prioritization chapter, especially because I think this pandemic has led to a lot of burnouts, especially for a lot of, for people all across the diaspora, as we are juggling multiple roles and, trying to do our best in these challenging situations. So can you share a prioritization tip that has worked well for you? What's your hack for prioritization?
Yeah, so prioritization, I think delegating, I think, I used to work for Upwork or Elance before Upwork, and I used to teach entrepreneurs how to hire remote teams, teach startups. I used to manage a WeWork partnership and do a bunch of trainings and lunch and learns and sponsor events and really try to help entrepreneurs build remote teams. And this was many years ago, back in 2013, 14, 15, when a lot of people were like, nope, I'd rather hire locally. And the concept of growing globally, like starting globally to be able to have more impact locally was not very much accepted. And it was constantly being rejected because a lot of people were like, blaming it on the platform or blaming it on the freelancers or the remote workers, and not really seeing that they can develop that. And this is another chapter of my book, is the intercultural intelligence, the global mindset of how do you really manage people in different countries and build a remote global team. And so I think that that's a really key skill. And I think that, the prioritization chapter helps people really understand how to think about things differently and focus on what they're good at, and then outsource or delegate the rest, and really figure out what should you be focused on doing, or what's most important to your business goals. What are things you can delegate that maybe it's not worth your time trying to get good at? If you're an entrepreneur, you should not be spending a ton of time trying to figure out your branding and marketing and building a logo and website and all that stuff. You need to be really focused on getting customers, but also making them wildly successful, and not just thinking about yourself. I think that's, it's tricky being an entrepreneur, because you have to really support your own livelihood and think a lot about yourself. But then at the end of the day, we become successful through helping other people become successful. And so prioritizing your impact, I think, is key. And then, being able to know when to delay something or dump it. Is it something that can be postponed? Is it something that you could, completely take off your list and might allow you to remove that overwhelm and focus on what you should be focused on? So I think that's one of my favorite chapters, because I think it's very actionable and practical, and helps people actually gives people tools to actually prioritize their time and their tasks better to make more impact, because we're wearing so many hats. It's really hard to juggle, I even have a different way of writing your bio, which I think that traditional long bio, it's become obsolete. Now we have to really think about how to express ourselves in those different hats. Being a generalist, for example, that was taboo or not seen very well to be a generalist, because then what value do you bring? And so I think that I'm really all about, leveraging being, I wouldn't say generalist, but being able to have these different hats, because you're able to adapt to different situations. And so the chapter really dives deeper into that.
I love that, prioritizing your impact. I think that's something that all of us can take a moment and reflect and figure out, like, where exactly we can't delegate. And that's exactly the kind of work that we should be doing. So thank you for reiterating that to us. And we have a comment from Deepika, who says, great advice. Thanks for sharing. Thank you, Deepika. We have a fun rapid fire round for you, Saleema. Are you ready for it?
Totally ready. Let's go.
All right. So tell us the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the following, and in one word. Role model.
Layla Jannah.
What does happiness mean to you?
Inner peace.
How do you define success?
Impact.
What is one fun thing about Saleema that is exclusive to our Career Up Leadership podcast listeners?
Saleema speaks lots of languages.
I know. So I know at least two of them, Spanish and Portuguese. So I have something fun that I'm going to make you do towards the end of the episode. But tell us, what is your native language, and one word to describe yourself in it?
My native language is English, and I'd say, being a polyglot is who I am.
That's pretty impressive. And that's a fun way to sum up our episode today, Saleema. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and, the wonderful things that make who you are, the real authentic Saleema. Do you have any parting thoughts to our listeners?
Yeah, so I just want to say that, if you're on this path of reinventing yourself, just look at it as an opportunity. Sometimes adversity is actually an opportunity, or an opportunity in disguise. And so I think just being really proactive about that reinvention is really key. And if you are an entrepreneur, really, again, it's a time where a lot of us are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, which I think in the future of work, which we're already in, a lot of people should be entrepreneurs or hybridpreneurs, as I said, doing multiple things, but really trying to be the CEO of your life, and think about where you want to be and what you need to do to get there. And if you need direction or you need strategy, don't try to be the strategist and try to figure out the direction yourself. There's lots of support out there. I run a business accelerator where we actually help entrepreneurs get that direction and strategy to get there, because entrepreneurs are oftentimes trying to be the visionary and the executor and the strategist and the designer, all these different roles at the same time. So really think about where you want to be and what are the things you need to get there, and what kind of support you need as well in your journey.
That's very impressive. Thank you so much, Saleema, on that. So for me, the three key takeaways on our 101st episode with Saleema Vellani, who's an award-winning social impact entrepreneur, is: one, resilience is very key as a leadership trait. And two, fail smartly. And I would say fail often in a smart way. But the most important aspect is prioritize your impact. I think as entrepreneurs, we all need to keep that at the back of our mind. And the third and the most important of all is have an amazing support system who believes in you, who trusts in you no matter what you're going through. So those are the three key takeaways for me. Saleema, any other parting thoughts before we wrap up this episode today?
No, that's it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So here's the fun thing that I want to make you do. So given that, Portuguese and Spanish as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to teach me how to say this. I'm going to ask our listeners to subscribe to Career Leadership Podcast on YouTube. So tell me, how can I make this peppy and say this in Portuguese?
Yeah, so you can say, you would say in Brazilian Portuguese, pode ligar a meus canais sociais.
Okay. You got to go slow for me. It's my first time I'm hearing Portuguese all my life.
Sure. So, vocês podem ligar a meus canais sociais para manter contato. No,
amazing.
There's a different ways to say it, but yeah, basically, connect with me and stay in touch on YouTube or whatever channel. And so there's different ways to say it. And Brazilian Portuguese is very different than Portuguese from Portugal. So it really depends on who you're talking to.
That's awesome. So to our live listeners and those who are going to watch this on replay or hear it on a podcast streaming platform, we've taken the step to learn Portuguese to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So I hope you'll use this, as an amazing way to encourage us to learn more new languages. That's the fun thing that I'm going to do with my upcoming guests as well. So thank you so much, Saleema. This was amazing. And I'm so glad, amidst your busy schedule, you've taken time to be on our show to amplify Asian voices. So thank you so much again. And to all our live listeners, Pawan Wadlamudi, Deepika Kandelwal, we also had Nabila. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your kind words of encouragement. And to win the free book, all you have to do is just drop in one key takeaway and we'll announce the winners in a couple of weeks. So feel free to drop in a quick takeaway. And we have Deepika who says, obrigada. Is that Portuguese?
That's Portuguese. That's thank you. De nada, Deepika.
De nada, Deepika. Thank you so much. This is fun. It's a nice way to engage and learn new languages. Thank you so much, Saleema. And thank you, Deepika, as well. I hope you'll drop a key takeaway, which will give you a chance to win this free book from Saleema as well. And to our wonderful listeners, do continue to follow me, Priyanka Komla, and a Career Leadership podcast page on LinkedIn. And if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a subscribe and like. For our podcast lovers, please give us a like, subscribe, and we would love to get a review and rating on how this podcast has helped you become a better version of yourself. Until our next episode, which is going to happen next Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern with an amazing guest. This is your host, Priyanka Komla, signing off from Career Leadership Podcast, a podcast to spotlight purpose-driven Asian leaders making an impact. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, Saleema, as well.
Thank you so much.